Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Michael Noland here, and boy, I've got a great video for you guys tonight. I'm going to give my top 10 list of the greatest rhythm sections in rock and roll. Now, for you guys out there that aren't musicians, the rhythm section in a band is usually identified by the bass player and the drummer. And I'm going to be going over my top 10 list of those combos. Now, I have three criteria for tonight's list. First of all is the musicianship, but not just the musicianship, not just the riff ability of the bass player or the ability of the drummer to play triplets like no other human being can, but how well they play together, how they lock together. And that brings me to my second criteria, how well those two people service the song. I've said it before, haven't I, folks? It's always in the song. No matter how great of players you have in a band, if they don't have the right material, nobody cares, all right? So that's my second criteria. My third criteria is their legacy. Now, by legacy, I don't mean how famous they were, although there are plenty of famous people on this list, but the legacy that they left, their style of playing, their thumbprint on music. Now, getting back to riffability, if I was just counting that, you'd see a ton of metal bands and even progressive bands on this list, and there would be no room for anybody else. So that's my three criteria. Keep that in mind as we go along. All right, so that gets me to my number 10 spot. At number 10 is a drummer and a bass player that didn't belong to a rock band at all, but you've got to put them on this list. Of course, I'm talking about two of the most famous members of the unknown Wrecking Crew, that group of musicians that you've heard 1,000 times on hundreds of #1 hits. And of course, I'm talking about Hal Blaine on drums with Carol Kaye on bass. Now, anybody who knows anything about Hal Blaine, you know he's a fantastic drummer. He was a superstar all on his own. As a matter of fact, out of the Wrecking Crew, he's the guy that rose to the cream of the crop playing Vegas under his own name. I mean, this guy was well known. But when he locked in to Carol Kaye's bass line on these recordings, man, you know what? They were just fantastic. So at number 10, I choose Carol Kaye and Hal Blaine. All right, now we get into the rock bands proper, and at number 9, Dennis Dunaway and Neil Smith from the original Alice Cooper Band. Now, as you guys know, if you've seen any amount of my videos, I'm a big Alice Cooper fan. I think he's a great lyricist, and I love the whole sound that especially the original Alice Cooper Band. You know, the band who had Vince as their lead singer before he legally changed his name to the band's name, Alice Cooper. But you know what? I'm going to have to do a whole video on this band because it seems a little lopsided to present the rhythm section first when covering this band, because it's the other players as well, Alice's input, all of that. But you know, on second thought, this is a good place to start. Let's start with the drummer and the bass player for Alice Cooper. You know what? These guys had a distinct sound. I've already told you guys how I discovered Alice Cooper. I was living back in North Carolina. I had spent a year back there. I was born there, raised in California, but went back there for my 11th grade year. Now, it was right around that time that I heard the album Killer after watching a band practice, and they were covering already Alice Cooper songs, and I was absolutely transfixed by the bass player and the drummer because they really had this great primitive sound. So at number 9, Dennis Dunaway and Neil Smith. All right, so at number 8, this duo was chosen not because of their riffability, although both of them are fine on that, especially the bass player, but it was the legacy that these two left, along with how well they serviced the song. And of course, I'm talking about Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr. Now, some of you may be thinking, what? I don't care any duo that has Ringo as a truly great drummer and part of a truly great rhythm section. I just don't agree with that. But I've given my reasons in the past, haven't I? Ringo's style, I call it almost a diminutive style. And by that, I mean he's a diminutive man. He's a small man. He's also left-handed, but he picked up and saw how drums were put together, and he just learned to play on a right-handed kit. When you take that aspect and take his smallness into consideration and how he is almost late to those drums, he developed his own sound. And of course, with the great Paul McCartney as bassist to back that up, well, I almost feel guilty putting these two this low. All right, so that gets us to number 7. And my choice is Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Now, they belong on this list just for the fact that they could keep up with that maniac on guitar, and what resulted was almost a lopsided presentation, a sound we had never heard before. Part psychedelic, part blues, a lot of rock and roll, and a sense of pop right there in the center, and you've got one of the greatest bands in rock and roll history. Okay, that gets us to number 6, and of course I choose Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker from Cream. All right, now we're on to another power trio, aren't we? There's a few on this list. You know what? Bass players and drummers really show through on these power trios, and I've got to tell you, Cream is one of the very best power trios in rock. But you know what? There was a real bare sound to Cream, especially live, and with the fantastic chops of Ginger Baker and the anchor, solid, and yet progressive playing of Jack Bruce, you definitely had a pair that belong on this list tonight. All right, that leads us to the top 5, folks, and in the number 5 position, I choose Geddy Lee and Neil Peart. You know, Neil, by the way, was their lyricist, and so he already brought more into the band than your average drummer anyway. And the way these two would lock together, allowing their guitarist to really just orchestrate that entire band, along with Geddy being the lead vocalist, these guys had to be in the top 5, and of course they're right there in the number 5 position. All right, so in the number 4 position, we're talking about one of my favorite bands of all time. Every single member of this band were experts at what they did. And of course, I'm talking about Roger Glover and Ian Pace from Deep Purple. With the phenomenal vocalists they had, the virtuosos they had on keyboards and guitar, this had to be a rock-solid unit, and a rock-solid unit that could go progressive every once in a while, and these two did it so very well. One of my very favorite acts in rock and roll. All right, that gets us to the top 3. In the number 3 position, I choose Chris Squire and Bill Bruford. All right, I paused there. I admit that, but that was in deference to the great Alan White. I had seen Yes with Alan White, and I loved his drumming. But you know what? You cannot replace Bill Bruford with Yes at them being at their truly greatest. One of my favorite bands of all time, as you guys know, and I just couldn't believe he was out of the band that quickly and that permanently. Which leads us to the number 2 spot. Who challenged the number 1 spot? Of course, John Entwistle and Keith Moon of The Who. Now, The Who as a band, I'm a little hot and cold with them. I wasn't a great fan of their early mod music, and I was okay with Quadrophenia, Tommy less so. But you know what? It was when they were at their very best, and of course I'm talking about my favorite album by them, which is coming to mind right now, and of course that's Who's Next. I know, everybody goes, that's too easy, Mike. But damn it, it's a great album. And live, I've seen this band live at one of their most famous concerts, and I can tell you one thing. John Entwistle and Keith Moon could not be beat by anybody on the planet, except, of course, my number one pair. And that, of course, is John Paul Jones and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. You know, I've made so many freaking videos on Led Zeppelin that for those of you who have seen those videos, you're going to go, oh no, he's going to go on and on and on. But here's the deal. You had John Paul Jones, who was one of the most well-known studio musicians before he joined Led Zeppelin, just like my number 10 spot. They were studio musicians, right? And John Bonham, who learned it the hard way, and learned it the fast way, and learned it the throbbing way, and learned it, well, the right way. And between the two of these, now I've discussed that John Bonham always played with Jimmy Page, so how could he and John Paul Jones make a great rhythm section? Well, there it is. I've said it before. John Paul Jones, the secret weapon to Led Zeppelin, made that happen. It's how he glued in to John Bonham, who was glued in to Jimmy. Absolutely phenomenal playing. I can't see anybody ever taking them off of the number one spot ever, folks. Okay, so that's the video for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, all right, here it comes. Give us a thumbs up. You know, that helps the YouTube algorithm do its thing, and good times for all. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, oh man, that's easy. That doesn't take much. All you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button, then tap that top bell icon, and you'll be notified of all of my future videos on classic rock, a little bit what we covered tonight, the live music scene, the music industry today, and the future of said industry. All right, I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, and folks, I mean it. Together, you and I, we are the tribe. And I'll see you in my next video.